In recent days, thousands of Jewish settlers in the West Bank have clashed with Israeli police. Who are these settlers? Why are the police preventing their activity, and why now? Welcome to the Israel Explainer with Rabbi Dr. Daniel Friedman. The Bible says God gave Israel to the Jewish people, but then the Romans came and conquered the land, exiling most of the Jewish population. During the late 19th and early 20th centuries, there was a huge movement of Jews to return to their homeland. They called themselves pioneers and worked to build Jewish settlements throughout the land. After being a minority for some 2 millennia, the Jews started to become a significant presence once again. In 1947, the UN resolved to partition Israel into 2 states, one for the Jews and one for the Arabs, who would eventually become known as Palestinians. The Jews accepted the offer, the Palestinians refused. Jordan expanded its borders into the area meant for the Palestinians and called it the West Bank. The Jews living there were forced to retreat into the state of Israel. In 1967, Jordan and others attempted to conquer Israel. In 6 days, Israel was victorious and gained control over the parts of Israel previously occupied by Jordan. Originally, the Israeli government encouraged Jews to move to the area, proudly continuing the dream of the early Zionist pioneers who settled throughout the land of Israel. Today, the West Bank contains vibrant Jewish cities of tens and thousands apiece. In 1995, the US brokered an agreement between Israel and the Palestinians called the Oslo Accords. The West Bank was divided into 3 areas, A, B, and C. A would be controlled by the Palestinians, C by Israel, and B jointly. The arrangement was designed to lead eventually to the establishment of a Palestinian state. But due to security and leadership issues, that never came to pass. Meanwhile, despite pledges by officials on each side to limit expansion, residents on the ground both continued their activities. On one side, Palestinians living in Area C, meant for Israel, continued to build and expand, claiming that the land had been taken away from them by the Jewish state. And on the other side, Jews, inspired by the Zionist dream, continued to build settlements throughout the disputed territories. When these settlements are started, they're called outposts, and may consist of people living in RVs and mobile homes. They maintain that Jews have the right to live anywhere in the land of Israel, and that they're simply continuing to implement the visions and goals of their parents and grandparents who made the desert bloom and built the state of Israel. And they complain that Israel turns a blind eye to Palestinian construction while penalizing Jewish activity. In a nod to US requests, in recent decades, Israel has frozen all settlement expansion and clamped down on settler efforts to establish new outposts. Right now, as Israel heads into a new election season, candidate responses to settler activity is proving to be a useful demarcation line for voters to determine where politicians stand on these complicated issues. Praying for peace in the Holy Land, I'm Rabbi Dr. Daniel Friedman, and this is the Israel Explainer.